Please welcome House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Congresswomen Katherine Clark and Ayanna Pressley. And Congresswoman Trahan.
Good morning. Welcome, students, faculty, staff, and friends, to this morning's forum. And a warm welcome to Tufts University, to all the viewers joining us online. It is my honor to welcome to campus this delegation of distinguished Congresswomen. Joining us today is Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi, who will be back in Boston later this month to receive the JFK Profile and Courage Award for her extraordinary public service. And I'd like to welcome back to campus Representative Katherine Clark and Representative Ayanna Pressley. Two of our campuses are fortunate to be represented in Congress by these two committed leaders. Also with us is Congresswoman Trahan, representing Massachusetts' 3rd District. It is a pleasure to have you here this morning. We have many elected officials from our host communities and the state legislature joining us in the audience this morning. Thank you all for joining us for this important policy discussion. I particularly want to acknowledge Medford Mayor Stephanie Burke for joining us today. Thank you, Madam Mayor, for being here and for your leadership in our host community. I also wish to welcome Marie Cassidy of the Medford Family Network, who is in the audience. Later this month, at commencement, we will recognize her with an honorary Doctor of Public Service for her leadership and dedication to enriching the lives of children and families in Medford. And finally, I want to welcome back to the Hill Tufts alum Nyla Bolas, the CEO of Jumpstart. We have many of our Jumpstart student volunteers in the audience today. Tufts is one of Jumpstart's oldest university partners, and we are proud of the leadership and service that our Jumpstart students provide to local preschoolers. Earlier this morning, our congressional guests toured the Elliott Pearson Department of Child Study and Human Development and the Children's School. For more than 50 years, Elliott Pearson has been an important training ground for preschool teachers. Today, Elliott Pearson is at the forefront of innovation in early childhood education. We are honored that Tufts was selected to host this morning's discussion on early education and childcare accessibility and affordability. We are looking forward to our panelists' insights on these issues, which are of critical importance to families, communities, public policy, the economy, and the next generation of students. It is now my pleasure to introduce this morning's moderator, Congresswoman Katherine Clark, who has served the 5th District of Massachusetts since 2013. In Congress, she brings her experience as a state senator, state representative, general counsel for the Massachusetts Office of Child Care Services, and policy chief for the state attorney general. Congresswoman Clark's career in public service is driven by her commitment to helping children and families succeed. She is a vocal advocate for ending wage discrimination, protecting women's health care, access to affordable, high-quality child care, paid family leave, safer schools, and other reforms to address the challenges women and families face. Please join me in welcoming this morning's moderator, Congresswoman Clark.
Thank you so much. Thank you, President Monaco. Thank you, Tufts University, for welcoming us. Welcome, Jumbos. We are delighted to be here. I want to start first by welcoming our speaker, Madam Speaker, back to the Commonwealth, to Tufts University campus. We are so delighted to have you. And Ayanna and I have the great privilege, both representing Tufts. It wasn't good enough for one member of Congress. You needed two, and we are just so delighted to have your voice, Ayanna, in Congress. It is just such a treasure to have such a good friend and such an advocate here. And Lori, we are so pleased that you came down to be with us. You sit on the Committee of Jurisdiction on Education and Workforce Development, and they are so tied. What we do with childcare and our workforce. And that's why we're really here. The first 100 days in Congress, the majority that we have been working on our platform, our For the People agenda. And in the first 100 days, we've been able to pass legislation guaranteeing equal pay for equal work, reauthorizing the Violence Against Women Act, passing H.R. 1, which cleans up corruption and helps us protect that fundamental right to vote. We have passed bills reducing gun violence, and we are just getting started. And so as we move into... and climate change is I said we were just getting started, and we are really turning our sights towards infrastructure and climate change, transportation, housing, all those issues that are so fundamental to our economy and to families' success and opportunity. And childcare is a critical piece of this that really cuts across all of what we are trying to do, because it helps parents be able to participate in the workforce, and it helps develop that workforce of the future. And we just came from Elliott Pearson, where we saw Emily, Nick, wonderful children working on their robotics, their bioengineering. They taught us about bioluminescence. Not quite sure what is, I don't think that was my kindergarten experience, but it is part of what is incredible about Tufts' emphasis since the 1950s on early education and care. And these issues for families are so important. The data is all there. We know what a difference it makes. Infants, toddlers, preschoolers, and our out-of-school care, whether that's preschool, after school, or summer sessions. All of this is about making sure that every child is ready to learn, and reading at grade level by third grade, where we know children make that change from learning how to read to using their reading skills to learn. And that's the critical place that we want to help families get to. But it is expensive for consumers and for families. Here in Massachusetts, it can be as much as in-state tuition. And we know that only 1 out of 5 families who need childcare in Massachusetts are able to afford it if we use the 7% of income standard. That's a shocking statistic. And only 1 out of 6 children who qualify for a subsidy are able to obtain one. And this ripple effect for parents, for children, for our economy, and for employers, we have seen up close and personal what this means. And we know that access, quality, and affordability are the issues that we need to support in Congress to make it work for communities at home. And we know the importance also, high costs to consumers, but low wages to our early educators and care providers. Whether you are working in a childcare or working in an after-school program, these are the challenges that we are taking on, and we have no greater champion than the Speaker of the House. Her career is so storied. I don't need to really introduce her to you, but I want to say this. She's an incredible mentor. She is, I keep saying I have some time in my life to try and be able to keep up with her. I'm still exhausted from a trip we took a year ago, and she's had several dozen since then. But what really strikes me about Nancy Pelosi, as the children of Elliot Pearson just gave her a card that said, "Dear Speaker Nancy," which I love, is everything is done in her professional and personal life with an eye towards children and building that future. And with that commitment is why she always has the values spot on. And we couldn't be more proud to call you Speaker, and we couldn't be more proud to have you here today. Let's give her a huge welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, President Monaco. Thank you for your hospitality here, for your introduction of our. You said wonderful things about Katherine Clark, but what everyone should know is all of that is recognized by our colleagues in the Congress. She is the Vice Chair of the House Democratic Caucus. And she knows of what she speaks when she's talking about children and early childhood development, the rest because she serves on the Appropriations Subcommittee that funds all of that, health, human services, and education. So thank you for your leadership there. Thank you. Let me, again, Madam Mayor, Mayor Berg, to all of you, thank you for being with us this morning. Thank you for the jump start that you are giving. That's the perfect name. Because everything that we do has to be about the children and their future. And I'm honored to be here with 3 colleagues who are very much about the future. And I want to thank all of you, whether you're on this side of the Tufts campus in St. Catherine or this side of the Tufts campus. Now, I know politics pretty well, but the level of politics of deciding who represents Tufts is a level of politics beyond me. But they seem to have worked it out, Mr. President. Ayanna Pressley, she serves on the Financial Services Committee and the Government Reform Committee. Not to digress, but 2 of the committees who have jurisdiction over preserving our Constitution as we're in the debate right now. and her, she'll speak for herself, but I admire her commitment to the Financial Services Committee because that's where education, consumer protections, urban issues are. It has a, financial service doesn't tell the story, the total story, so she's there to be a champion for America's working families in a place where some financial decisions are made that affect them, and that affects our children as well. And Laura Trahan, she helps us honor our oath of office. We take an oath to protect and defend, and to do that we have to be a strong nation. So she's on the Armed Services Committee, which is appropriate for her district, and that's important. But she's also on the Education and Labor Committee because the strength of our country cannot just be measured in our military might, but in the health, education, and well-being of the American people. So she has all of the strength in her to commit. And now, these were 2 very hard committees to be on. They were very desirable. She got both of them. But I said when we were at the school that I was genuinely, you know, it's a cliche almost to say I'm happy to be here. No, I was genuinely happy to be there with the children. This is very self-serving, but, you know, self-promotion is a terrible thing, but somebody has to do it. But this is very self-serving. When we went into the thing, a little boy named Nick was sitting there with robots, and he said, And the teacher said, he knows who you are. He said, "Hi, Nancy Pelosi. I've known you since I was a baby." Oh, really? Was he 5 years old or something like that? But in any event, the point is when people want to run for office, any office, be it President of the United States, Congress of the United States, Mayor of the city, I always say, know your why. Because if you know your why, you'll know your what, and you know how to get things done because you know your purpose. My why has always been the 1 in 5 children in America who lives in poverty. I have 5 children. My husband and I have 5 children, 9 grandchildren. But when we were having our 5 children, it was seeing all the love, mentoring. That's the way we saw it anyway. They may have thought we were interfering in their lives. We thought it was a good thing. You have to ask them. But in any event, all of the attention and the love and the whatever that they had, and just the thought that in the greatest country that ever existed in the history of the world, 1 in 5 children goes to sleep hungry at night. 1 in 5 children lives in poverty in some places. 1 in 4. So that's what got me from the kitchen to Congress, was that motivation. So that's why to see what's happening at the Elliott Pearson Center for Child Study and Human Development was so remarkable, and to see right there on the same, I don't know whose district we went from. We went from the school to the program, but to see the application of it all. It's about the children. Elections are about the future. It's all about what we do for them. So when people ask me what are the 3 most important issues facing the Congress, I always say the same thing. Our children, our children, our children. Their health, their education, the economic security of their families, a safe, healthy environment, safe from gun violence as well, an environment in which they can thrive, in a world at peace in which they can reach their fulfillment. And I said this when I was here with Dean, now Solomon, Mr. Ambassador, a number of years ago. We talked about our country, but central to it all. Thank you, doctors. So many titles, Mr. Ambassador. So in any case, to see what is happening here as really a model, and Mr. President Monaco, your background and the rest being such a focus on our children, their development, and what science is teaching us, and that scientific knowledge, that evidence-based, it requires us to make different decisions, not than others who might not want to know the evidence or the data, so that they have to act upon it. So this is central to what we do. And child care, children learning, parents earning, it's all central to their well-being. And of course, housing is too, to the psychological well-being of children. So it's all connected, all around the children. And I congratulate Tufts for what is happening here. Just remarkable at the Elliott Pearson Center as well as the school. What we have proposed in our Better Deal for America's Future for Children relates to child tax credits, increasing those and making them refundable to low and moderate income families. It talks about expand the conversation into nutrition, housing issues that are about well-being. In fact, you can go online and see our, but we have child access, means parents in schools. Katherine is taking the lead on parents on campuses and how we have to have access. So coming at it every possible way, what does it mean to the children? And what we saw here this morning means a great deal, not to just the children who are being beautifully attended to and educated here, but as a model for the rest of the country. So I thank you for that. And I want to yield to a person who has, all 3 of your members of Congress have had a focus on education and children in their lives, in their previous public participation. Ayanna has been, Congresswoman Pressley just brings this with such a fervor to the Congress of the United States, and I want to yield to her in recognition for what she brings to it, how she prioritizes it, and the magnificent representation brings to her district. Ayanna.
Oh, thank you. Well, this is a historic moment in that this is an unprecedented number of women serving in the Massachusetts delegation. And so that unprecedented number of women serving in the Massachusetts delegation in the House of Representatives, it would have been an honor for me just to share a stage with them. But the fact that I get to govern with them every day is a tremendous honor and deeply rewarding, especially given the times that we currently find ourselves in. And Speaker Pelosi, so we're sitting here, I introduced her to my daughter on opening day, swearing-in day, and I said, and this is a history maker. And she's never forgotten that. But our speaker leads with such a grit and such grace, and I agree with you, Katherine, she is indefatigable. She does not drink coffee. I think she says she just eats chocolate, so that... Dark chocolate. But she's indefatigable, and she embodies tremendous grit and grace, and the way that she has comported herself when we were being onboarded in the midst of a federal government shutdown, and making the ACA possible and so many other things. We salute you and we thank you for your leadership and for your mentorship. And Katherine and Lori, I'll talk too much, so I'll just say, I love you all. It's an honor to serve with you. You know, on the issue of childcare, so I'll just say there are three things that guide me daily in this work. One, I lifted up at a meeting with the speaker yesterday. We were honoring environmental justice champions and warriors from throughout the globe, some of whom have had to live in exile because they've endangered their lives in their fight to preserve rainforests and things like that. And so one of the things that I lifted up in that room that I think of every day are the words that a politician considers future elections, but a statesman or woman considers future generations. And so every day I'm asking myself that, you know, am I conducting myself as a stateswoman and considering future generations? The second that I go back to is during new member orientation, the best advice that I received there was that in the process of legislating and governing, it is very easy to forget the plot. And the plot is the people, and to never forget that. So are we considering future generations? Are we remembering the people? And then finally, something that I was crystallized for me in my time on the Boston City Council, and I think really speaks to the issue of childcare specifically, is that we know that education is life's great equalizer, but we are remiss in not considering the whole equation if we don't recognize that family is life's great stabilizer, and one cannot exist without the other. So when we're talking about the people and future generations, family is the stabilizer, education is the equalizer, and we need to support them working in symbiotic partnership. And so when we think of our children, we have to remind ourselves that they are not independent contractors. They exist in families and are a part of whole communities. And so as the former chair of the Public Health Committee on the City Council and now serving on financial services, what I'm focused on is the holistic livability, sustainability, safety, and health of community. Because the best gift that you can give a child is a stable parent. So I can't just focus on that child. They're not an independent contractor. The reality is that increasingly so, parents, caregivers, families are destabilized because of these already entrenched inequities and disparities that are only being exacerbated. And we continue to do our work as legislators to disrupt that and to create a better ecosystem. I appreciate the speaker keeps bringing up housing, So I serve on financial services. The housing subcommittee is in there. The speaker is leading and are putting forward an infrastructure package. And one of the things that we're asserting in financial services is that housing has to be cited in the definition of infrastructure. It is not currently. But we know that it is a critical determinant of health. And so if we know that early childhood education and care foundationally determines the trajectory and mobility of a child, the house that they're living in is the critical part of that as well. So all of these issues are interrelated and interconnected, and I'll close here before I yield to Lori. Right, all these issues, address them in silos. And so the other thing I'll just say is I think about how family models are changing, but also how work is changing, and the definition of work is changing. And so how do we meet the need and not only provide accessible childcare by geography and socioeconomic status, but how do we meet it for every worker? There are very few operators that provide childcare for non-traditional, non-standard workers. Those in the trades, or increasingly so in the gig economy. And so these are all things that we have to consider. So look forward to your questions and more conversation. Honored to be here with you today, and I yield.
So thank you so much for having me come into your districts and be a part of today's discussion. It's one that I hold near and dear to my heart. I've got young daughters, 5 and 9, and 3 stepsons who are 20, 22, and 21. So, you know, for me, there's a couple of images that keep popping up in my brain that I'm going to hold on to forever. And the first one is the image of our swearing in of our speaker. When she invited all of the children who were in that chamber that day. A record 131 women are in our Congress, most in our nation's history, but my preferred definition of leadership is about making others better as a result of your presence and having that last into your absence. And there's no one who embodies that definition more than Speaker Pelosi. She's constantly thinking about the future and how she is setting up our children for a better life. And so to see my daughter up there, you're right up next to your grandchildren. I was embarrassed to see her just push on up there, and a little proud. Was just such a moment for us. The second one was during the State of the Union when we were all wearing our suffragette white, and there was a moment in the speech where the president was boasting about how many women had entered the workforce last quarter. And of course, we were all very proud of that statistic. But we knew that we had to get to work on making sure that we create the conditions for them to actually stay in the workforce. And that is what the For the People agenda is all about. That's early childhood education. That's paid leave. That's equal pay for equal work. Tax credits for daycare. So I'm delighted that I get to sit on the front lines of so many of those conversations as a member of the Education and Labor Committee, because our contribution to the infrastructure bill is a $100 billion investment in rebuilding our schools across the country so that our children are learning in environments that we can all be proud of and that will emphasize excellence. Finally, the other thing that I think about a lot, because I was fortunate to get on 2 very relevant committees, the Armed Services Committee and the Education and Labor Committee, is the intersection of those 2. When I was at the Elliott Pearson Center just this morning, I saw an investment in teaching young kids about robotics and STEM. And when I think about where we have to go as a country in terms of keeping up our competitive advantage in the global economy around AI and quantum computing and cybersecurity, we have to make those investments so early. So, and I'm looking forward to being an arbiter for those discussions as they intersect between the Armed Services Committee and the Education and Labor Committee, because it's programs like that in early education as well as programs in higher education so that we can get people the skills that they need quickly for the jobs that we actually attract and retain in this country. So I appreciate being a part of this conversation, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. You can see why it is such an honor and delight and privilege to go to work every day. And I just briefly there are way too many of you to actually acknowledge you by name, but if our state and local leaders could just rise for a minute, we're delighted to have you here, our partners. Thank you so much for being here, and I know your commitment to this issue and to being such incredible partners. We would like to move this to a community discussion and move to questions and answers. Jay has a microphone over there.
Good morning. Sharon Scott Chandler from ABCD. And I just want to start by thanking you. We are so incredibly fortunate to have you leading this effort, not only today, but for so many years for every one of you. I was fortunate years ago to attend the signing of the Head Start reauthorization in 2007 with you, Speaker, and it's just an incredible vision to see you back in that role. So thank you again. Sorry. My question is around Head Start, which I know is near and dear to everyone's heart, serving the most vulnerable children and families in our communities, and we know it works. But there are so many children who cannot access it. The wait list is very long, and there aren't enough seats for the children and families. So what can we do to eliminate that wait list and bring more comprehensive, holistic services to those who need it?
Thank you so much for pointing out Head Start, because it really is, as you said, central and an important initiative for kids to have a Head Start. Unfortunately, sometimes we have to even fight off cuts or shall we say, philosophical limitations that might be placed on it. But thank you for pointing out the importance of it. It's about the money, and that's the committee that Congresswoman Clark sits on, the subcommittee on education. But I just want you to know that we share your concern about it being a priority, want to make it more accessible, but I'm going to tell you a Head Start story. So we're having a meeting such as this in Manhattan, in Hunter College, and we had a Head Start mom tell her story about what Head Start meant to her. And she got up there and she was, 5 kids, single parent, English second language, every wonderful challenge you could imagine. And she got up there and she now had a job and she was confident, and so she accepted the invitation to be there. But the night before, she sat her 5 children down and she said, I feel very good about going to work every day, but I'm going to be speaking to all of these, mostly women, tomorrow at Hunter College, and I want to rehearse my speech with you. So she rehearses the speech and talks about Head Start and what it means to her and this or that. At the end of it, her 4-year-old raises her hand and she says, "Yes, do you have a question or a comment?" She said, "Yeah, I want to know who gave you permission to use my name in your speech." But does it tell you anything more you need to know about self-esteem and confidence and all the rest of that? So it's so very, very important, and has been for a very long time, a proven record. But again, everything that's been there, we want to subject to make sure we have the more resources, always need more, but target in a way that gets the most benefit. Thank you for focusing on that.
I'd just like to add another quick anecdote. One of the saddest Head Start visits I ever had was with Marjorie Decker, who I believe is there. Not Marjorie's fault, but Marjorie is actually a Head Start alumna. And we went to see a Head Start program in Cambridge, and it was beautiful. The rooms are beautiful, the decorations, the supplies, it was ready, but there were no children because of budget cuts. And it was just devastating to see that. And we're not where we need to be, but I can tell you that the Appropriations Committee has put another $1.5 billion into the budget this year for Head Start, and we will keep going. We know how critical it is to families, and thank you, Sharon, for all your work and for all the ABCD does for our communities.
If I just may just segue for a moment, one of the debates that we have is when our colleagues say they need to make some cuts in the budget to, I can't even barely say it, to not to add to the deficit after they gave a $2 trillion cut to the richest people in America, not to go there. But anyway, the point is that this will maybe smack of slight partisanship, but it's only an observation of policy, and that is when they say to us that they have to cut education in any form, early childhood, K through 12, or freeze Pell Grants or anything like that so that they can reduce the deficit. It is one of the dumbest, with stiff competition, mind you, one of the dumbest suggestions that they could make, because nothing brings more money to the Treasury than investment in education, earliest childhood, K through 12, higher ed, postgrad, lifetime learning for our workers. Nothing brings a bigger return. And just want to pay tribute again to the work of Vice Chair Clark's committee. I said to the president the other day, we went and talked about infrastructure, but sort of as a sidebar, I was talking to him about workforce development and those kinds of issues that are central to it. But I said to him, there's one thing that we really have to do in a very different way, bigger, is to fund IDEA. We are so delinquent in our federal, meeting our federal responsibilities for children with disabilities, and not assuming that he didn't know, but I just said, well, that means, whether it's from autism to children with more severe physical disabilities, et cetera. And then other members chimed in and said how important that is, not most importantly to what it means to the children, but what it means to budgets for school districts and the rest as well. So every piece that surrounds those children, and some of them have some, shall we say, learning challenges, and again, many of them are on Medicaid, so we're fighting those cuts as well.
And I would just add again, it's wonderful to see you. Thank you, ABCD. I am so proud to represent the Massachusetts 7th, to lift up the many assets that exist in this district that are models for the country, and ABCD is certainly one of them. And just, you saw right there some of that grit that I was talking about with the speaker. And perhaps I won't be as polite in saying that it is completely asinine. That they're willing to, tax cuts for the wealthy and for corporations, and would even entertain the idea of a space force. But we can't make these critical investments to stabilize families and our workforce and our economy. And so it is easy to make these deficits about fiscal deficits, but I've always maintained that our greatest deficit is not that of finances, it is an empathy deficit which informs those choices. And so we need to continue to hopefully appeal, get our colleagues on the other side, we need their support as well, and we'll just keep working. So
Great. We'll take a question from this side. Katie?
Hi, thank you for coming to speak with us today at Tufts. My name is Yuri Aguilar, and I'm a first-year student from Houston, Texas. I'm an AmeriCorps member in Jumpstart, and I spend many hours helping preschool children in Somerville develop their language, literacy, and social-emotional skills. All of us at Jumpstart absolutely love working with the children, and we realize the critical importance of children getting an early start and how that helps them be successful in school and beyond. Yet many of us will be graduating with significant debt, and preschool educators are paid some of the lowest salaries. So the money just doesn't add up. So my question is, what can be done to help and for us to, what can be done for well-trained, high-quality educators who are taking out loans to graduate college, be able to actually afford to start and be in the workforce and stay in the child workforce?
I'll start.
Okay.
Want me to start? Thank you. That is a question that comes up no matter where you are in the country. I mean, we were just talking about Head Start and the role and the importance of early childhood education in terms of closing the achievement gap in our country. But yet the average early childhood educator only makes $33,000 a year. So we know we have a workforce issue that we need to right-size. I would say in terms of student loan debt, this is something that is talked about on the Ed and Labor Committee on a weekly basis, whether it's reining in for-profits, to expanding our Pell Grant system, to offering incentives to businesses who help retire and pay back that student loan debt. That is, I think that there's a number of initiatives right now that are being proposed and debated, because right now the reality is we have 44 million Americans who are carrying $1.5 trillion in debt. I mean, just think about that. That's $1 trillion. So we have to fix that problem. There's lots of different ways, like I mentioned, with expanding programs that we already have. But I also observe that, I went to Lowell High School, and I started my freshman year with more than 900 classmates, and I graduated with 540. This notion that we were all going to the guidance department with the same goal of going to college is just, it's outdated. And we have to disrupt our models a whole lot if we're going to provide paths to more economic opportunity, more workforce options, close that income inequality gap. Frankly, it requires a mindset shift by everybody in this room. But also we have to make practical paths of education, which we are seeing great strides made with apprenticeships, community colleges that we've underfunded here in the state of Massachusetts, vocational and technical programs. We have to make those as noble as we do a college education, so that we can get people in the mode of learning and get them into a path where they can actually invest in a lifetime of learning. So I hear you. We think about this on the committee every day. We've accomplished a lot in the first 100 days, but I'm really looking forward to the next 100 days, because we're going to be doing the reauthorization of the Higher Education Act this year, and this is absolutely going to be at the forefront.
If I just may add, on the committee, the Congresswoman Trahan serves, they have a bill, Childcare for Working Families, Representative Chairman Scott's bill, to close the 0 to 5 gap, and that's going to be reintroduced soon. I just want to call to your attention, hashtag a better deal, a better deal on childcare. And to your point, you have to have increased compensation and training for childcare providers, educated childcare providers. So this is one presenter at one of our meetings such as this said about childcare to the mom said, well, are you really worth this much money? And she said, is your child worth this much money for you to pay me a reasonable compensation? But we have to recognize that we are giving to you all, when you're taking these responsibilities as teachers or Jump Start or whatever, you are custodians of our children's future. And that responsibility at that time that you are assuming must be recognized, trained for, and compensated appropriately for that. And that's our...
And to go quickly back to the intersection with housing and this issue and how they're all so tied together in our economy. At a recent town hall I had 2 weeks ago, we had a number of early education educators there, some of whom were making $13 an hour, some of whom were living in public housing. And the problem for them is how do they possibly afford to get that bachelor's and associate's degree, make that jump, because not only is that extremely difficult to do while working full-time, and most of them are moms and have their own families, but also because it would upset and put them out of public housing. So while we're looking at this, and we're looking at a bill in my office to specifically repay the loans of early educators, because we know that investment of public dollars is one of the very best that we can make. But we also have to look at the family sustainability program and make sure that we're expanding that. So families in subsidized housing can have a guarantee that they have a chance to get the better job, get their incomes up, but keep their housing for a period of time so they can actually save money and make that jump into their own, to the next economic level for them. So all of the work that we're doing on the For the People agenda just is so intertwined, and that is a great example. Thank you for underscoring it for us.
Yeah, just again, I guess underscoring that point as well. If you're making, if you have loan forgiveness and then you're being paid, compensated according to your contribution, as much as that is possible, and then 80% of your income is going to rent, that affects your purchasing power, that affects everything. So these issues are all interconnected, but I also wanted to just bring into the space the early and child care, the early education and care providers in informal economies that are home and community-based, because they are making even less. And so we know that there are these wait lists, but the lion's share of kids in low income and communities of color will be in an informal economy, early education and care facility, usually receiving that in someone's home. And we have to support them in their professionalism, in their education, in their training, and in their wages as well, because over time, most of these businesses, they are owned by women and immigrants and people of color. And so these are small business, they're innovators as educators, but these are small business owners and operators. And we have to support them too and make sure that they have a stake in this conversation and the solutions that we're developing.
Thank you. Yeah, Jay?
Good morning. Thank you for being here. My name is Elena Reyes. I'm family childcare educator from Lawrence, Massachusetts. And my question is, the average childcare educator make $12 an hour in Massachusetts, so much less than that after their expenses. And most educators are women. What does this say about how we value our kids, our future, and the women?
Our kids and our women. Lori, you have a constituent.
My constituent from the SEIU, so thank you. Thank you for being here, and thank you for everything that you do. You are such an activist that goes well beyond Lawrence, a community that relies on us paying our teachers. It's as I said, the average starting salary for a Head Start teacher is only $33,000, and that is like a very real issue with attracting and retaining teachers, not losing them to teach in our schools. And so we have to make investments in not just early childhood education in those programs. And I will say, one place where the Mass delegation led right out of the gate was on the Childcare Development Block Grants. We all rallied together to preserve and increase that funding and making sure that it was properly dispensed in the state of Massachusetts. But we also have to focus on teacher pay. There's, as Ayanna said, my mom used to watch kids in her home because she understood, as a mom who juggled multiple part-time jobs for so much of while my sisters and I were young, that moms needed to go to work. If we're going to keep these women in the workforce the way we've been boasting about more women in the economy, more women in the Congress, more women in boardrooms, we actually have to solve the problem of early child care so that they're not making trade-offs between working and engaging in our economy and staying home to care for a child because that's their only option. So I do think that you've got a lot of advocates right now for more Head Start funding, for investment in early childhood education, for full-time kindergarten, which I just enrolled my youngest in this week while I was home. And we know that this is an issue that we have to solve for, especially in communities like Lawrence, like Lowell, like Haverhill, so many of the communities that Ayanna and Katherine represent as well. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, and to tie in, thank you for your work, for being here for family child care providers, because they're a critical part of the system. It's not just center-based care. They meet the scheduling needs that Ayanna was talking about, linguistic needs, and just having the ability to have someone in your neighborhood. But they are women-owned businesses, and everything that impacts American families really comes home for family child care providers. It's a low-wage industry. How can we help with capital costs? How can we look as child care as infrastructure? How can we help you have affordable health insurance and homeowners insurance to cover your business? These are all things that we are working on that's part of our For the People agenda that really is reflected in supporting primarily women-owned businesses that are meeting this huge demand in our communities and supporting so many other businesses in our communities by giving parents an opportunity and often that flexibility that they need. I remember with my 3 sons, I was always the last mom to come screaming in. And, it was when I had childcare that was family-based, it was a more forgiving system. And I appreciated that. And I also know the struggles that provider had. And I know also, I remember the day when my husband and I looked at each other and realized my entire salary was going to childcare. And did that make any financial sense for us? And these are questions that American families ask over and over again. And we, as you highlighted, it is a critical piece of how we meet the changing needs of our families, and we can't leave family providers out of it.
If I just may say to our friend from SEIU, one of the issues that Chairwoman Clark mentioned earlier was that we passed and sent over to the Senate equal pay for equal work. And we think that women should be adequately compensated when they are at work. And no institution has done more for fairness in terms of equal pay for work than the trade union movement. So I thank you for that. But I just want to say that, and listening to you say you're running in last, with my 5, I was running in without even having washed my face. Because it's so, people have done, it's such an important responsibility. And that was a long time ago. We now know more about early childhood development and all the rest, and all of the importance of the attention that children need. And there's a 0 to 3 initiative that I met with folks the other day that you can diagnose, and I don't mean that in a negative way, diagnose opportunities or challenges early on in infancy. We now have a baby caucus to talk about going back that early. So this is, when we're talking about the providers, do we hear the voice of the future? Spoken at perfect timing when I said baby caucus.
You're so smart.
Catherine arranged that. But it's one of the most challenging jobs in the world, and when others are willing to assume that responsibility, we have to value it and quantify it in dollars and cents, as well as training and recognition for what it is. So thank you.
Yeah, so
for what
we
you're doing.
thank you a million times, and just one more thing that just speaks again to the intersectionality of all of this. Massachusetts has the highest cost for childcare. We're number 2, not the highest, but second, and this is nothing we want to be leading in the country. And so when Lori talks about, we thank your mom for providing that service because that's what she wanted to do, but we know there are many that are providing that service because they could not find quality, affordable, accessible childcare for their own children. So they said, I'm going to stay home with my child and open a business. So these things are all connected in that way. So, but you've got some real warriors up here that are going to continue to work to reconcile that.
Just to, forgive me, just to say, one of the exciting things about Swearing In Day, in case you watched, is that there's so many more women in Congress now, and women who have young children, so that other women seeing that say somebody who shares my concern, understands my challenge. In fact, we now have 115 women in the House of Representatives, 91 Democrats and 15 Republicans, because we made the decision that we would have more women there. And we do believe that when women succeed, America succeeds. So that's how we value it.
Great. Yeah, next question.
Hi, I'm Tom, and I'm a CEO of a tech company here in Massachusetts, and I'm part of a group of many Massachusetts CEOs that are really, really concerned about the many, many unfilled jobs that we have that require some kind of skills enhancement or some kind of additional degree. We know that one of the biggest obstacles to people mid-career upgrading their skills for those kinds of jobs is access to affordable childcare. And so my question is, are there ways that business can lean in and help you a better partner and a good partner in this really important effort to get affordable childcare to everybody?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yes, is the answer. We need your help and we need your advocacy, because I think that we have the data. And a lot of it comes right from Tufts University. We know what works. We know how this is transformative for children and the workforce of the future, but also the workforce of right now. And the wonderful part of having low unemployment, it also creates an issue with retaining and attracting our parents and parents of young children. We need them in the workforce. They frequently want to be there. And childcare is the link to getting them there, but it has to be affordable. As I said, we have this dubious title of being, we always like to be first here in the Commonwealth. We know that we have some competition from the left coast, but we, this is one title we don't want, and we need business to come forward and help us make the case. We have all the data about how this is one of the very best public investments that we can make. The return on the low end is for every dollar we put in to early education and out-of-school time, we get 7 back. But we need business to help us make that case. Speaking of out-of-school, 21st century grants, this administration were zeroed out. Zeroed out. That is what Betsy DeVos presented to the Appropriations Committee. We just passed our appropriations bill with $1.3 billion in it, but we need to do better and really look at the continuum of care. And business has such a role in saying that you need this workforce, and childcare can support it, and you're looking for the workforce of the future. Childcare supports that as well.
I must respond. Tom Clay is also a constituent of mine. Not only is he
You've packed our Medford house.
Not only is Tom the CEO of a high-tech company, but in his discretionary time, he is also the selectman in my hometown of Westford. And so I'm not surprised that Tom would step up and say, what can industry do to help? This is a shared responsibility. I mean, the joy of childcare is a shared responsibility. And so it's great to see your question. I do think that companies that are making this investment are actually realizing the benefit. It is a value proposition to their employees that help them attract and retain really great employees. And as I've seen diversity and inclusion initiatives just permeate the Fortune 500, this is part of that. They want to keep women, they want to keep diversity hanging in there through their ranks, but a lot of people check out in their 30s when they have to make that decision between raising my family and keeping my corporate job. And so I do think that industry making those investments is so key. And you know, it's clear. I think the last statistic I read was 85% of Americans are for tax subsidies or tax incentives for businesses to subsidize those investments. And so it's clearly a place where we're investing in the economy by doing it. We're investing in our families. We're investing in our children and their achievement over the long term. So I'm happy to hear you say it. I'm not surprised to hear you offer it. But we know that we have to partner with you, too, in terms of closing that skills gap. And I think that there are a lot of great programs that are being modeled here in the state of Massachusetts that we frankly just want to make contagious across the state and across the country in terms of using our shared assets, whether they're community colleges, our higher ed institutions, to get real pragmatic about the skills that we need for the jobs that we have, and making those pathways and those connections really accessible. So thanks, Tom.
Thank you. We unfortunately have reached the end of our scheduled time, but I hope that this conversation will be ongoing. We need your input in how we do this, and I can't thank Tufts University and all of you enough.
Yes.
They can never silence you, Catherine.
Go ahead.
If I may, I would just like to thank Chairwoman Clark, Congresswoman Pressley, Congresswoman Trahan, and each and every one of you, Mr. President, for being here and for being part of the community that cares about our children and their future. When we're here, Congresswoman Trahan, I heard her speak so beautifully at Georgetown University welcoming ceremony yesterday, an alumna of Georgetown, how proud they are of her. And she's going to, forgive me for saying this again, but I was reading some sayings on the wall from our founders of our country. As you know, this area was so responsible for our independence and the rest. And what they said at the time, they put temporal markers. For example, they would say, now are the times that try men, these are the times that try men soul. You know, they put temporal markers. And one of the things they said, Thomas Paine said, the times have found us. The times found our founders to do what they did. The times found Abraham Lincoln 77 years ago. He spoke in temporal markers as well. And we believe that the times have found each and every one of us in this room, in the Congress, in the country. Not that we claim to be like our founders or Lincoln, but we do think the urgency and challenges to fairness and opportunity, equality of opportunity in our country that's urgent. And the times found the women when they marched, the times found women when they ran, the times found the women when they voted, times found women when they came to Congress to make the difference. But it's not just about the women. It's about all of us taking responsibility to honor that vision of our founders about a country of opportunity, of a constitution with the separation of powers, et cetera. But more importantly, what it means to our children. And I just want to put a word in for the arts on this, because we could talk about a large number of subjects: paid family leave, equal pay for equal work, childcare, et cetera. There are many issues that make it affordable for families to do the best for their children. But being right here, I can't resist quoting John Adams. He wrote to Abigail and he said, I must study war and politics so that our sons could study engineering and science and mathematics, etc., so that their children would have the freedom to study music and poetry and art, and I think he said embroidery as well. But the point is that our country has always been about giving the next generation more opportunity. And I do believe that the confidence that children have in the arts helps them in other ways in their education and their development. And that has to be part. That's why it was so wonderful to get back to Elliott Pearson, that these children were learning robotics in an artistic way. And again, imagination. And the poet Shelley once said, the greatest force for moral good is imagination. To be creative, that's a great thing. To be creative, to imagine a better future, to understand other people's point of view. So the times have found us to, again, honor that vision of our founders, to support the aspirations of our children. That's what they were all about. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much.